Welcome to the Public Health Spotlight podcast, brought to you by Panoramic Associates and partnered with the ADPH. I'm Callum, your co-host today, and I'm with the Director of Public Health of Cumberland Council, Colin Cox. Colin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and welcome to Cumberland.
Thank you very much. Just in case any audience members that don't know you, please could you give us a bit of a brief overview of your career to date, if that's all right?
Certainly. So I started off in Stockport as the drug action team coordinator back in the late 90s. I'd done a psychology degree at university, and one of the things that I did in my final year there was about the psychology of addictions. And I got interested through that in substance misuse and particularly drug use, and about how our policy didn't seem to be working around tackling drug use. And that role came up. It was a perfect one to follow on for me. So that really got me into the working in partnership within a local authority context, because the drug action team was based in the local authority in Stockport, and also then into the sort of broader public health agendas. As I sort of developed that role, I moved more into a sort of broader health partnership function within Stockport. And at some point, I needed to make a decision about which direction my career was going to go. I was really interested in public health more than the sort of health and social care integration side of things. But I was also really interested in environmental issues. And so I did a bit of slithering about whether to jump down a public health route or an environment route, and went for public health on the grounds that it's very broad. You can do whatever you like. So I thought I could do environmental stuff within public health.
Nice.
And right enough, now I am doing a bit of that. But soon. Following on from that, I moved to Manchester City Council as the Assistant Director of what was in the Joint Health Unit. We might say a little bit more about the Joint Health Unit later.
Definitely.
Then public health started to become less medicalised. I managed to become a public health consultant as Deputy Director of Public Health in Manchester, and then to Cumbria County Council as the Director of Public Health in Cumbria. And then 2.5 years ago, through local government reorganisation, Cumbria Council split in two and merged with some of the districts, and split into Cumberland Council and Westmorland and Furness Council. And I'm now the Director of Public Health and Customer and Community Wellbeing for Cumberland Council. So I've got a much broader strategic remit.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. Really interesting. I know you mentioned it was the broadness of public health that sort of maybe teared you to that side. Was there anything in particular in public health that really sort of brought you in? I know there was broadness, but there were any specific areas that really sort of drew you into public health against, the environmental side that you first mentioned?
Not specifically. It was the breadth of the possibility. I've always wanted to be doing something that meant that I thought I was making a difference in the world, and that's mainly to people. And so my concern about the environment is also about a concern about people, of course. And public health just offers you that opportunity in spades. And really, whatever you're interested in, you can do it in public health, because in public health we're interested in what the determinants of health and well-being. And what are those determinants? Well, it's like everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
From the environment to lifestyle, obviously people think about, but culture, how do the arts play into all of this? Just about everything plays in, and you can take it down a research route. You can think philosophically about it. You can do whatever you like. So public health is a world to whatever you're interested in.
Definitely. And with your when you with your masters in psychology, how did that sort of shape? And then you going into Stockport, how has that shaped your approach in public health? Having that type of understanding straight off the bat.
So psychology was my undergraduate degree, or my master's degree, but what it's done, it has shaped the way I think about things. It's shaped by my general worldview, I suppose. And it's shaped the way that I see how people interact with the world and how they behave. Because psychology is not just about how people think, it is about how people behave. And so once you start to understand about the impact of external environments, things like family dynamics, all of that sort of thing, the impact of trauma on people's thinking styles, and how you cannot see human behavior as just being a simple matter of choice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the other framing in the health debate, isn't it? It's about
Definitely.
people choose their lifestyles. You start to see that that's not actually true, but we do need to help people to overcome some of the challenges that have perhaps been had in the past or in the present. But also, you can help improve things by helping people change the way they think, and all of that is really important. The way I approach public health.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, moving from Stockport and going to Manchester, you said you were assistant director there. Firstly, what attracted you to Manchester?
Well, Manchester, it's a fantastic city. It's really innovative, and that the joint health unit in Manchester was way ahead of its time. It was set up within the local authority, but it was part funded by the NHS and part funded by the local authority at a time when public health was still firmly embedded within the NHS.
Yeah.
But Manchester recognised that it was the council that was going to be influential on a lot of the determinants of health. So they appointed people in to this new unit. And again, that's been such an influence on my life, because the way it worked just made things feel quite easy. We had people who were, as I say, the director was a local authority employee. So half of us were local authority, half of us were NHS, but we were in an integrated management structure. Nobody faffed around caring about who their line manager was or what organisation it was. It just felt that you could do things, and you had the freedom and the flexibility to do quite a lot of exciting and interesting things in the unit. And it was very much, obviously, in place before public health moved.
Yeah.
But it was what public health has become in local government in some respects. So
Yeah.
way ahead of its time.
And how was the collaboration? How was it, like you say, decision making? Was it just something you'd never experienced and just...
Yeah. Yes. I mean, obviously, it was a council, so decision-making processes had all the processes that every council does. But what it seemed to have was an ability to make partnership working relatively easy. And that's not always the case. Partnership working depends on people, but it depends on structures. It depends on attitudes. And Manchester had a way of working that seemed to do well on that.
Were there any main parts of sort of the way that they worked that I don't know if you're about to cut it out, Emma, but all I'm trying to get is were there specific processes or ways in which they worked that really made it work a lot better? I know there would have been a lot of things that they would have, yeah, if you sort of see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't think it was so much about process.
No, more on...
because I've done partnership working, obviously, for a long, long time now. I've been doing this for 30 years. In my experience, a really good structure and a really good process can help things. But if you don't have the people who are behind that,
Yeah.
no amount of structure is going to get over a situation where people are not willing to work together.
100%.
If you've got good people who are really willing to work together and a common agenda that they're wanting to work on, a bit of a dodgy structure can make things a little bit more difficult, but you're still going to overcome that. A lot of it is about the people and the attitude.
And was that sort of more hiring the right people, or was it just, what was it about the people that made them like that? Was everyone very passionate and wanted it to work and could see and believed in the goal that then brought everybody together?
Yeah, I think there was a number of factors.
Culture.
That was one of them.
Yeah.
We had a very charismatic director of the Joint Health Unit, who then became the Director of Public Health in Manchester, David Regan.
Yeah.
Who I worked with for 11 years in the Joint Health Unit and then the Public Health team. And he inspired a kind of fierce loyalty round about him. He really helped get people to make partnership working easy.
Yeah.
So that was very valuable. But also Manchester itself has an attitude that says we can make things happen, and that's really attractive
Powerful.
and powerful.
Definitely. Thank you. At your time in Manchester, what were the main challenges with the population? Like what were you facing, and sort of what initiatives did you come up with to try and overcome them?
Manchester is a city of substantial public health challenge, as I'm sure you're aware. We regularly, when the annual life expectancy figures came out, we would always check whether it was us or Blackpool who were at the bottom. And so there are massive problems in Manchester, which are, of course, are related to socio-economic deprivation more than anything else. I remember having come from Stockport, where the most affluent ward was sort of, if you start with the most deprived being the first most deprived, the most affluent ward in the country was about 8,800, and Stockport, so it was about 8,600 was the most affluent, and the most deprived was about the 50th most deprived. The inequalities were huge.
Yeah.
In Manchester, the most affluent ward, when I was there, was bang in the middle of the index of deprivation tables. So, that gives a bit of a sense of the scale of the challenge. So we did a huge amount of working with the third sector, in particular, working at a community level, because you've got to get into local communities to make these things work. But just working across the whole gamut of public health, all major public health topics covered off by the work that we did in the Joint Health Unit and the public health team, and what was then the health promotion service as well as a separate team, and everybody worked really closely on that.
Were there any specific programs or projects of work that really stand out to you at your time in Manchester? And what were they?
Yeah,
How did they
so
do?
the two of the ones that I was fairly well involved with, I remember the Food Futures programme, where we set up a whole food partnership, which wasn't just about healthy diets. We said, if you're going to look at food, you have to look at it as a whole. It's got to be about health. It's got to be about the environment, and it's got to be about the local economy. And so we tried to create something that considered food in the round, not just about helping change people's diets. So we did a load of work there with things like promoting allotment growing in the city, for example. We did a lot of work with the Manchester Food Festival around promoting healthy eating through the food festival, as well as some of the more traditional stuff that you might think the public health would do about promoting healthy diets. And it was a really good, solid initiative which lasted for many years. And so that was I think one of the things that has really influenced what I've done more locally, because we've now got another sort of whole food partnership approach here in Cumberland. The other one that I think was hugely successful was the Valuing Older People initiative in Manchester, which, again, I like to claim a little bit of credit for, because I was involved in writing the original strategy, but actually the person who made it really work was the program manager that we appointed, Paul McGarry, who was, again, a sort of inspirational leader in this space, and really managed to engage a huge number of people in an agenda about tackling the way we see older people. So that's why it was called Valuing Older People. It was about making sure that people are seen as an asset in society, not a burden on society.
Yeah.
And making sure that we're changing society in a way that recognizes the contribution that people can make and provides support and help when necessary. And he engaged the academic sector in a way that I've never seen anybody else do within a public health setting. And it was a really strong initiative.
Thank you for sharing with that. What made you stay there for? Well, I say, but what led you to be there for over 11 years? It sounds like it was a very busy time in that you learned a lot, but was there anything in particular? 11 years is a long time in one council, so what was it?
Well, it is, but it's always changing.
Yeah.
So in that time, I may have been starting off as the assistant director of the Joint Health Unit, but then we moved into a situation where non-medics could become public health consultants. I became a public health consultant in that space of time. And then local authorities, public health transferred across to local authorities. I project managed the transition from the NHS into local government. So there was always something new coming along, and it kept it really exciting and vibrant.
Thank you. Then you became the DPH at Cumbria.
Yeah.
What was the transition like, going from like an urban city like Manchester to then a rural area like Cumbria?
It was a bit of an eye-opener.
I can imagine.
I remember so well driving round Cumbria, getting to know the place a bit better, driving between meetings in different places in Cumbria, and just having this sense of wonder, this sense of somebody's actually paying me to do this right now. Normally you pay to do this stuff on holiday. I would really irritate my friends in Manchester by Facebook posts with photographs of the fells taken from the hotel that we were having a meeting in, and just going another hard day in the office. So I do remember spending the first little time in Cumbria going, I'm not sure I know how to do public health here.
Really?
And then I went to Millom,
Okay.
and I thought, okay, this I get. This is like Uden Heath. Millom is a former mining town on the west coast. It's the sort of place that if towns were being built now, you wouldn't put a town in Millom. It's at the end of a peninsula, quite a long way from anywhere. It grew up on the back of mining, and it's got substantial challenges as well. And you look at some of the housing and you recognise it from the sort of thing that you sometimes see in places like Manchester. So it is different because you've got other issues, but actually, the health problems are similar. It doesn't matter where you're living. You've still got a similar sort of pattern of ill health. We do have an older population in Manchester, and that makes a difference. And we have much more separate spaces. And so we've got different towns across the patch, whereas in Manchester it was all much one big urban area, albeit people did identify with the areas that they lived in. So actually, you adjust the way you're doing things. You can adapt them, but you also have to be very much aware that there are things that you don't need to think about quite so much in a city. Travel time, distances, that's sort of the rural aspect of somewhere like Cumbria does make a difference to things like how you analyse data. Index of deprivation, I've mentioned already, works really, really well in a city because deprivation and affluence tend to cluster.
Yeah.
They don't do that so much in a rural area. You can have people who've got a lot of money living very close to people who don't. You can have people whose house looks like they should probably have a lot of money, but who actually don't because it's a farm that's been in the family for years, and they look as if they should be affluent, but they're not. So there's a lot to do to get under the skin of some of the challenges in somewhere like Cumbria.
Definitely. With those challenges, you sort of half said it there, but like you say, where is sparse, but people are very close, inequalities is around one another. What challenges do that throw up, and how do you try and manage overseeing everything and prioritizing the challenges?
Well, one of the key challenges, because in public health, we try to be data-driven a lot of the time. And so there is a risk in somewhere like Cumbria that you end up not putting your time and attention on a substantial portion of the population because they don't live in an area that looks as if it's deprived or has problems. If you look at the index of deprivation map for Cumbria, what it shows is our towns.
Yeah.
You can just see them on the map. It's very clear. But actually, there's a lot of that hidden deprivation in our rural areas. So trying to find that and use local knowledge to know to try to draw people in to the sort of services that we need to have is one of the major challenges.
With your experience that you mentioned in Manchester around the aging population, in a rural area, you said you have obviously an even older population now. How or what have you, from what you've learned in Manchester, have you brought that into now Cumbria and Cumberland?
Yes, because of course the challenge with the aging population is different as well. Because one of the reasons we've got a super aging population is because people move here when they retire. Yeah. So you've got a combination of affluent aging and less affluent aging.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
Don't think of that.
so there's differences in the way that you need to approach that. But you've also got things in a city where things like public transport, whatever people in the city think of public transport, it's an awful lot better than it is in Cumbria. So it's much easier for people who perhaps can't drive anymore to get around, to do things, to use services, to access services. In somewhere like Cumbria, if you don't have a car, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So you've got to think about how you get services out to people, not just how you help people get into services. So all of those things are certainly important when it comes to thinking about aging.
Definitely. I know I mentioned Cumbria and Cumberland then. What was it like for you to actually go through the split? And yeah, what was the transition like there?
Oh, do you know, it was hard and it was sad
Why?
because we built, I think, a really, really good team in Cumbria, and it was working effectively. But we were just coming out of the pandemic, I suppose, at that time. But it felt like it was a strong team that was working well, and then to have to split that team in two felt like a real wrench.
Yeah.
And there were practical challenges associated with it as well, because obviously, unlike some services where you're providing direct services to the public health has an agenda regardless of the size of the population. If you've got social work, for example, you can split it. Now, there are people, of course, who cover the whole area, but a social worker has a patch, has a population. If you've got half the population, you have half the social workers. It's not quite so hard. In public health, you've still got to cover the same agenda. Whether your population is 500,000 as it was in Cumbria or 265,000 as it is in Cumberland. Only when you split things, you've got to try and do that with, in my case, 60% of the staff, 60% of the budget, and 100% of the agenda.
Yeah.
Whenever I feel hard done by about that, I think about Katrina in Westmoreland and Furness, who of course has got 40% of the staff and 40% of the budget, and so her challenge is even greater. But that did make life difficult, and it's still making life difficult because we haven't managed to rebuild all that capacity. So people are having to pick up things they weren't picking up before, different areas of work. The person who led for me on public mental health ended up in Westmoreland and Furness. The person who led on sexual health ended up in Westmoreland and Furness. So we've had to get people who can pick up some of those skills here as well. So it's definitely been a practical challenge for us to take this forward and deliver the whole agenda, as well as that kind of emotional wrench of splitting the intensive service.
Definitely. What opportunities did it provide?
Well, of course, it provided opportunities as
Yeah.
well. And in Cumberland, the decision was taken that if you're going to have a director of public health, and you have to have a director of public health, then you may as well make them work for the money. So I ended up being, unlike in Cumbria, where I was a third tier assistant director level post, Cumberland decided to put the director of public health as a second tier director, and give additional responsibilities into that role. So I picked up all of what was the district's public protection function, environmental health, licensing, that sort of thing, as well as trading standards from the county. So I picked up the public protection sphere.
Yeah.
And also a sphere which was called communities, which is broadly anything that had community in the title. So community development, the community grants giving, community safety, that's engagement with the third sector, that sort of thing, all as another bit of my portfolio. And since LGR, we've had a senior management restructure, and I've also now picked up customer services as well. So that's it includes things like the libraries, the customer service centre. It includes our business support functions too. So that's that's actually kind of trebled my staff taking that on. It's a much bigger service than the whole of the rest of my service was put together.
Definitely.
So it's become a much bigger and broader agenda.
How do you manage and prioritize your bigger agenda? Like you say, you sort of, naturally been given more and more responsibility and own a lot more. How do you manage it?
It's a challenge, but it's a challenge for every
Yeah.
director to manage the size of the agenda they've got.
Yeah.
And from a public health perspective, which is really what we're talking about, it has somewhat moved me away from being a jobbing day-to-day DPH. I still do a DPH function, but that sense of all I do is manage the public health team is definitely moved away. But I'm fortunate that I've got a really, really good team who know what they're doing, and we've been able to recruit one of the consultants in my old team as an assistant director for public health. So she kind of manages that whole function very, very effectively, and the team is excellent. So I don't need to do so much of that kind of direct control of the system because they know what they're doing.
Really nice to have a good team that you can rely on and depend on. Again, with having more broader teams, how's that collaboration been? Obviously, we've seen more and more teams. Are they collaborating even better? Yeah, because everyone's under one.
Yeah, and it's a very strange experience to see teams coming together and going apart. The first time I saw this was actually way back in Stockport. I was based in what was called the policy planning unit, which started off as a very small team, and there were like 5 or 6 people in the corporate policy unit.
Yeah.
And then the crime and disorder agenda came in, and that was embedded within the policy planning unit. And then as that grew, it got too big for the office, literally too big for the office. And they moved to an office 2 doors down. And suddenly, we didn't see them anymore. We didn't know what they were doing anymore. And that made a massive difference. You can see the opposite happening with what's happened with my services now. And we always work together to some extent. But now that we're all under the one roof, actually, we're working together much more easily. And there's no reason for that. It's human psychology, in fact, back to psychology.
Yeah.
It feels different. And people are more likely to collaborate when they're part of the one structure. So yes, we're making the best of that, because the rationale behind me getting the customer services was about how do we put public health and prevention at the heart of what we do as a council.
Yeah.
Cumberland Council, when it was formed, chose as its slogan, driven very much by our political leadership, health and well-being is at the heart of everything we do. Now, that's brilliant. Yeah, it's absolutely music to the ears of a director of public health, of course. And then you go, oh, we've actually got to do it now.
Yeah.
So that sense of we've got people who are dealing with the public every day. How do we make them a prevention-focused service? So how do we, when somebody's phoning up asking about their council tax because they're having difficulty paying their council tax, how do we help them with that? But also go, if you're having a trouble paying your council tax, there's probably more going on in your life that we can probably help you with. How do we do that? How do we support people to get to try to reduce the chances of them actually needing other things later on down the line? And that's why I've picked up those services as well. So it might feel like it's just a much bigger corporate director role, but there is a rationale
behind it. Thank you. Focusing on the DPH role in particular, for anyone aspiring to a DPH or looking to get into public health and a little bit more interested around the role, what do you enjoy most about being a director of public health?
Oh, so there are 2 things, I think. Well, first, I've touched on the kind of variety of things that I can do. You can dabble in whatever you like. I mentioned my interest in the environment. As we've moved into the sort of role I'm in now, I've also started chairing the local nature partnership, which is a Cumbria-wide body.
Amazing.
So you get to play into various things that you're interested in. And I think it's unusual. I don't know if there's any other directors of public health who chair local nature partnership, but I think it's critical, and particularly in somewhere like Cumbria, which is so rural, and where farming and agriculture play such big role in our economy and in our society, that's a really important bit of the public health agenda. So you can play into anything you like. But as a director, you get to have an influence on a lot of different things. In public health, you can have influence, but in most parts of public health, you've got a few things that you're involved in. As a director, you get to try to shape and influence a very wide range of what's going on across the local authority, either directly by being directly involved in things like developing the economic strategy, or we're involved in the devolution discussions now, or by shaping the team. And that's the other bit that I love about being a director in this role. You get to try to shape a team and skill up and empower a team to become that fantastic team that knows what it's doing and can just crack on and deliver stuff. That's the exciting bit about being a director, is that trying to shape a culture and shape the environment in which people work to try and get the best out of people.
Thank you. If you could give yourself one piece of advice going into public health, if you could go back and do that now, what bit of advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Because when I look back on my career in public health, none of it was really planned. It all kind of just emerged. I've always just taken the next step, and that's always seemed to work. Finally, I've done very well out of that. So there's probably nothing in my career terms that I would say you should do this differently. I've looked for opportunities and taken them when they came. I suppose if I was to give myself some advice, back to my much younger self, I think I would say, don't take yourself so seriously. I think I was probably insufferably kind of serious at times when I was much younger. I've learnt to have a much more light touch on life the older I've got. And I suppose possibly related to that, I would say learn to relax. I've always driven my wife mad on holiday because I don't sit by the pool and read.
Yeah.
I'm always wanting to go off and look at Roman ruins or go and hike in the mountains or something like that.
Yeah.
Last year or year before, we were in Croatia with some friends, and they liked sitting by the pool. So I spent a bit of time sitting by the pool reading. And I've always said, if this is what I wanted to do with my time, I could do it at home. And it wasn't until then that I realized that, of course, if I'd been at home, I wouldn't just have been sitting and reading. I'd have been mowing the lawn or doing whatever it would be. And I'm going, I can't believe I've got to 50 and I've only just realized what the point of a holiday is. So there you go. Learn to relax a bit.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm exactly the same as you. My wife would watch this and say, absolutely.
Not everything needs to be an opportunity for learning and self-improvement.
Not always. Sometimes you just got to learn to take a step back and relax, but it's hard to do it, especially in your job. Colin, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure.
Much appreciated. Take care. Thank you for tuning into the Public Health Spotlight podcast. We really appreciate it. Tune in for the next episodes.